Yeah, Sphere has helped me on several occasions, including working with communities in refugee camps, IDP settlements. But one experience I would like to share is one of the refugee camps in northern Kenya, where we're doing food distribution. And we had taken the right quantities in terms of the 2,100 kilocalories per person per day, and given refugees as per the size of the household. But 1 year is because staff were breaking over Christmas holidays, so it decided to give the refugees the ration for the whole month, which is 2,100 kilocalories per person times the number of days. Unfortunately, after 14 days, the refugees had consumed the entire food, and they were left to a position where they could actually starve. So when the meeting was held, the humanitarian agencies were adamant that they had given them enough food to last for the whole month, but also reflecting on the sphere standard. It was not just the amount of food given, but in terms of how it was given, the participation, the engagement of communities, and get to know their ways of living and preferences. So looking at the sphere principles, looking at issue of coordination, community engagement, and other qualitative indicators, we found out that it was necessary to complement more food to the refugees, because as much as they had made the minimum, the indicator, there were other factors that were to be considered in terms of the lifestyles of the refugees, the context of the refugees, the culture of the refugees, and that helps us understand in terms of food aid, the amount of food given, but also looking at it in the context of the refugees. And that opened up my mind, plus other humanitarians, that there was more to sphere standards than just the indicators, that people are confusing the numbers versus the whole process. People should see a sphere as an open space, a movement that is open to all forms of society, the humanitarian actors, governments, communities. And most important thing is that sphere can be used in all humanitarian contexts, so long as it's discussed with the communities. There's good coordination. It is in coordination with other policies, and it complements the gaps. And that sphere is getting better every day, every other year, and that every experience of implementing sphere opens up ways for new experiences, and is also a good source for learning and getting better in aid delivery. And sphere can also help us in terms of saving resources, because it provides a platform for coordination, prioritization. It gives us checklists, for example, for assessments, getting to know how we can prioritize our needs. It gives us time to coordinate, time to consult, but also even for purposes of, let's say, like budgeting, where you can use the indicators and standards for you to be able to come up with quantities that then you can use for advocacy to the donors, to government, communities, and other stakeholders. So sphere is a tool that everybody should try to use it, especially the handbook, but also the movement itself. It gives us a platform for connection as trainers, as sphere practitioners, as policymakers, as donors, but also just to build this big humanitarian family that is based on human rights, that is based on participation, that is based on engagement, listening, and learning. To me personally, I've used many handbooks, many guidelines, but I rate sphere very highly, because it is one is practicability in the field, is that sphere can be used by staff in the field, it can be used by managers, it can be used by policymakers and decision makers, and even communities themselves, in terms of arranging themselves and being able to know what they can demand in terms of assistance. They know how they can coordinate among themselves in terms of putting the structures. So to me, I rate sphere as highly on the list, and the other standards are very important and complementary to the sphere. So using them along sphere and referencing with the sphere, then they add value to the whole process. But as a standalone, sphere is a very rich source, because of how it reaches out to the people in terms of capacity building, in terms of providing platforms for engagement, but also the resourcefulness. And most recently, on the sphere platform, it's now more interactive. You can actually make comments, you can make revisions, it can give you options for membership, it can give you options to interact with other practitioners like trainers that I belong to, and then be able to grow and learn from different regions of the world as well. One I may share is that in the early days of Sphere, the first handbook, the 2000 handbook, while working at the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, my organization was working in the wash sector, but also you're trying in terms of working in terms of access to not clean water, the potable water, but also in terms of making sure that the communities, especially the women, can get get water at the right time in the right quantities. One of the challenges is that there was water rationing in the camp. By the time the water was being released, it was either late in the evening or very early in the morning, which was not very helpful for mothers who had to do other duties like getting children ready for school, and maybe in the evening trying to prepare the evening meals for their families. So we had to use Sphere as a matter of advocacy to reach out to the organization that was coordinating WASH overall in the camp, that it was not about just providing the right amount of water, but it's also making it accessible to the communities, and at times whereby the most vulnerable, especially the women who had responsibility to go and collect water, they were at ease to do that when they have lesser burdens in the community to do that. And so that worked out, and there were revisions from 2 times of water provision into 3 times of water provision early morning. There was one from 12 to 2 o'clock, which gave people some room, and then the evening. And so that reduced the burden of women in terms of queuing at the tap for a long time when they had other responsibilities to handle at home. So to me, I think Sphere was a good tool to influence decision makers, that it was important that it's not just access by availability of water, but in terms of considering the people who are going to use that water and how they're going to get it in the most preferred manner, and then the time that was safe and appropriate to them in that particular instance. To me, I think the most significant of all the processes around Sphere has been the Sphere community. I'm looking at the people who have been trained in Sphere as trainers. These are a rich resource that is spread around the globe. And these are people who have gone ahead to do their own trainings, either in the organizations or as consultants, to make sure that the Sphere philosophy and message goes across. So to me, I think this pool should be harmonized, maybe a platform for coordination, so that they can be able to learn from them, review the lessons learned, and come up with a strategy of how to go forward. The other issue I'd like to emphasize is possibly that now that Sphere is a global movement, and you already have Sphere focal points, we have Sphere families across the globe. Maybe if we can move just beyond to having a focal point, but possibly having a kind of Sphere hubs. For example, you could talk of the Horn of Africa, you could talk of the South Americas, the North Americas, the European hub, the Middle East hub, whereby those teams can be able to prioritize the needs of Sphere in terms of how Sphere can get to the next level, but also mobilize the regional resources in terms of supporting the Sphere movement. It could be in terms of publication, it could be in terms of translating the material, it could be in terms of splitting it into smaller components for them to use. It could also be in terms of seeing how can they get on board other actors that possibly have not been in this space. I'm talking about the private sector. There will be a lot of private sectors that possibly want to contribute into the Sphere movement, either in terms of publication, in terms of hosting meetings, global meetings, in terms of providing equipment, platforms for communication. They want to give discounts, for example, for Sphere material to go on board. There could be teams, for example, who want to move Sphere material from one point to the other. Publishing firms, they want to do that as part of CSS. So to me, our thing is that how can we maximize, one, on the global space, 2, on the frontline teams that are working in the field, 3, the regional hubs that can be able then to meet, discuss Sphere based on the local context and see how they can promote the same, but also bring on board governments, private sector that are willing to partner with the Sphere team to make sure that the movement moves and then Sphere can be sustained at all levels.